Okay, welcome back. I am here with Dr. Paul Schempp, and not really, people in our industry aren't going to necessarily know you the second they see you pop on the screen. So why don't you take a second, introduce yourself, and let everybody kind of know your field of study, and then we'll get into what we're going to talk about today.
All right, absolutely. And by the way, Jeff, it's always great talking with you. So it's good to see you. My primary job is I'm a professor at the University of Georgia, where I run a research laboratory. And what we study is experts, specifically, what are their characteristics and how do they acquire these skills that have made them consistently outstanding in their field. Our primary population that we study are elite level coaches. Those would be professional coaches, Olympic coaches, and so forth. But we also study highly successful athletes and also business leaders. We've done some work with Delta Airlines, UPS, General Electric, and so forth. And really what we're trying to identify, Jeff, is what are the distinguishing qualities, or what do these people do differently? What are the differentiators that allow them to be consistently successful over their competitors? So that's really at the heart of what I do. And because of that, I'm often invited to speak at conferences and associations and so forth about what these people can do.
Mm-hmm. And you teach this down to like at a university level. It's a university level course, right, as well as you've written books on this and you've published research papers. And you and I had the chance of meeting because you live in Athens, which is the home of Cellular Labs. And we were introduced, and I was just fascinated by some of the stories you're able to tell, of some of the coaches you're able to interview, and some of the situations you're able to dissect. And we brought you to Resonate in 2018 to speak around the topic of mindset and to talk around this idea of how do you train your brain to manage you through tough situations. And people can access the video, the links below. And so people can get to the more detail of it. And I want you to go into it all the way, but talk a little bit about how elite coaches train themselves to where the last 2 minutes of a quarter, the last 2 minutes of a half, their mind knows what to do and how to do it. And that's how they're able to make these quick decisions. And how we as non-coaches and non-professional athletes or collegiate athletes can use that same type of mindset to help us be better at business.
Yeah, that's a great question. The honest answer is, for most of these people, they've been beat up by experience. In other words, they weren't born successful. They got their heads crushed, and they didn't like that. And so they had to discover ways that they could avoid getting beat up. And I'm going to guess many of the people listening to this, many of the clients and customers of Cellular Labs are feeling the very similar experience right now. So how do they deal with that? And so over time, they've either learned it through experience, trying different things, trial and error, or they've talked to other coaches who have also experienced this or been mentored by other coaches to say, how do you go about doing this? How did you just survive that? It was interesting. Just a few minutes ago, I was telling you, I was talking with Jack Bowerly, who was our 2008 Olympic women's swim coach, and he currently coaches at the University of Georgia. And Jack is going to be one of our Olympic coaches for 2021. And we're talking about exactly what you just brought up. How do you function in this time of severe pressure and make these decisions? You want to ask me something specific?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, we at Cellular Labs have a few mottos, a few things that we try to live by. One is that you'll never have 100% of the data to make the correct decision. Yeah. And so we really encourage our team to use whatever data is available to make a decision. And then as new data becomes available, change if you need to. And I think that we talked about this back in 2018. That a lot of people in our industry get locked into this analysis paralysis, where they're waiting for the numbers, they're waiting for the data to tell them something's going to work or not work. And you have to, I call it fail forward. You have to be able to fail forward, and you have to be able to trust your decision-making process that it will be right a certain amount of the time, even if it's not right all of the time.
Oh, you're spot on with that. In fact, one of the things that I look for when we study these high-level performance, business or sports, is the people at the very, very top consistently there will use a sentence that I don't hear from the sub-elite people. And that is, I don't know. They know what they don't know. And so just what you just said here, Jeff, is they're willing to change as new information comes in, and they don't believe they know it all. They believe that they know as much as they can, but you know what? It's time to make a decision. It's going to hurt me if I don't make a decision. So if I delay until I, quote unquote, have all of the information, which I'll never have, I'm actually going to hurt myself and my organization. So you're right. They know it's time to pull the trigger. But when they do that, and again, just what you said, they realize this might not be the right decision. As new information comes in and it plays out, maybe I need to change and be flexible. And again, that's a characteristic of somebody who's successful. Look at all the people today that have to pivot and change directions or modify what they do because of the business environment we're in now.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the resistance to change, and the necessity for change, and maybe if you have any suggestions for how you can help that, because I see that a lot in our industry. When new things are announced, everybody freaks out. They want to talk about all the reasons why it shouldn't change.
Right.
Talk a little bit about how, because I was curious preparing to talk to you today. I was thinking to myself, I'm a fan of the University of Missouri. I know we're rivals on the football field. Missouri got a new football coach, right? Young coach. I think it's his second head coaching job.
Right.
And he is getting massive praise for the way he's been able to adapt his recruiting in the midst of this whole crisis. I would assume there are other coaches who are struggling through the adaptation of not being able to go off campus and visit recruits in their house. So, and we're seeing the same thing on the Amazon side, right? Sellers are they're not able to get their inventory into Amazon. They're not able to get their inventory from overseas. The world has changed. The velocity of their sales got totally uprooted. How do you, what suggestions do you have for people from what you've studied in terms of how to handle this type of change and how to take it head on?
Yeah, that's a great point. We call it the comfort of competence. In other words, I'm pretty good at what I do, and it makes me feel good to look and see, I've had some level of success. The comfort comes from its routine. I don't have to work as hard as I used to work. Doesn't mean I slack off, but when change comes, it threatens that in some way. Well, those are people who are pretty competent in what they do. That's why we call it the comfort of competence. But people who are outstanding in the field never feel 100% comfortable. In fact, when I was just talking to Jack Bowerly, one of our Olympic coaches, that's what he said 3 times. He said, I'm never 100% satisfied. I'm always thinking we could do this a little bit differently. We could do this a little bit better. Because Jeff, to lead, you can't do what everybody else does. To lead, you can't do what you've always done before. Something's going to change. Sometimes in your business, it changes by the hour. But for most of us, I like
to call them internet years, right? Like dog years.
There you go. Exactly. And so if you don't, as you used a great word, if you don't have the mindset that the world is going to change, how do I get ahead of the curve? What do I need to look at? That's a critical perspective to take. And so the great ones are always doing that. Now, if you want to talk about how do you do that, how do you get ahead of the curve, a couple of ways. One is just listen to the news, which gets tragically disappointing. So I don't suggest that as a heavy dose, but talk to other people, particularly in your field.
And when you say, I just want to cut you off, when you say news, you don't necessarily mean watch the national news, follow your industry news, follow the trends. Don't just follow the conversation on Facebook, follow the trends that are happening by going to what are the digital trends and what are the, and what are big businesses, follow articles of big businesses and what they're trying to do and look for change in that regard.
Yeah, that's perfect. You just reminded me of a study that I started to do and we never fully completed it. We were looking at expert restaurateurs, people who owned restaurants. And what we discovered, interestingly enough, is the people who were consistently at the top weren't all that interested in talking to the satisfied clients because they knew they were going to come back. I mean, it's always nice to hear, Jeff, you know, this is
Yep.
great. I love your food. I love your product, this and that. They wanted to hear from the clients that weren't satisfied, the clients who weren't going to come back. What didn't you like? Because that's where the opportunities lie. And Jeff, you and I were just talking about this before we started recording about this crisis time, being able to see the opportunities this presents. And you had a great quote. You want to share it now?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it was in hearing something I heard from Mark Cuban where he said that this is the time to be an entrepreneur, that entrepreneurs have the ability to really crush the Goliath because they can move and change and adapt so much faster than larger organizations.
Right. And what we, again, know about people who are consistently successful is that they know in many ways, you know, we're all on the same field.
Right.
We're all in the same business environment. The ones who thrive are going to be the ones who aren't going to be worrying about the problem. In other words, oh, this pandemic.
Right. You can't feel like you're behind because of this.
Right.
Right. Like you can't, if you're using it as an excuse, you're destined to fail.
Yep. You got to be looking towards the solutions. Everybody knows the problem, but what's the solution? That's where the gold is.
So I heard a speaker here in Chicago. There's a restaurant group called Let Us Entertain You. They're gigantic. You've probably heard of Maggiano's is the one that has kind of gone global. And the founder of that organization was asked, you develop all these restaurant concepts. When do you know that a restaurant will succeed? And he said, the first 21 days is the most critical. And it's exactly why you said, he said the first 21 days is the most critical because we come to market with a concept. We come to market with an idea, and our ability to hear the market, adapt and change within the first 3 weeks will determine our overall ability to be successful. Mm-hmm. Essentially, they plan that whatever they come to market with is going to not be what they want it to be. And you and I have talked about this, about being emotionally connected to what we do, and that you have to break the emotional connection. I want to have one emotional connection, and that's to
be successful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Either working or it's not working. Right. And the numbers should tell me one way or another.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And by the way, again, let's take another characteristic that makes people successful. Just what you said, you know, the number one factor that you've got to focus on. And then you know all the factors that contribute to that. And that's your primary focus area. Anything else is a distraction. If it's not helping you make more money, and by the way, it doesn't have to be, let's take employee relationships. Is that going to help? Yes, it is. So you need to pay attention to that. Understanding markets, is that going to, of course, so you need to pay attention to that. But there needs to be the one thing that you aspire to achieve, and you have to recognize that. And anything that's not contributing to it, Jeff, I'm just rephrasing what you just said. Yep. Anything that doesn't contribute to that doesn't merit your attention.
Well, thank you, Dr. Paul. Dr. Paul Schempp, professor at University of Georgia. We're going to have links to your full presentation below from 2018 Resonate. If you're into psychology, sociology, the mindset of like successful people, this is the presentation for you to watch. Always enjoy speaking with you. Can't wait to get back to town to go and grab a drink and shake hands and say hello and be social again, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thank you, Jeff. Big fan of Seller Labs, and in particular, the people that comprise your team. You've got some fabulous people there, and they've got a good leader. So thanks, I appreciate it. Thank you.